The office tower was quiet at this hour, the usual buzz of phones and chatter replaced by the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the occasional echo of someone walking through the polished marble hallways. Cassandra glanced at her watch, almost midnight, and sighed. Staying late had become routine, but tonight felt different. She had promised herself a simple night, finish the reports, leave, and finally breathe. As she walked toward the elevator, she noticed someone standing by the call button. He was tall, sharply dressed, with a tie loosened just enough to suggest a long day or perhaps a long night. His dark hair fell slightly over his forehead, and there was a casual confidence about him that made Cassandra's chest tighten unexpectedly. Their eyes met, and a small, polite smile passed between them. "Late night?" he asked, his voice low but smooth, almost teasing. "Looks like it," she replied, stepping closer. "And you?" "Same," he said, glancing at the empty lobby around them. "Can't seem to leave work behind." The elevator dinged, and the doors slid open. They stepped inside together, the confined space suddenly charged with a strange electricity. Cassandra pressed the button for her floor, and he did the same for his. The silence was comfortable at first, filled only by the soft mechanical whir of the elevator. But there was something electric in the air, something that made her pulse quicken despite herself. She noticed how the light brushed against his sharp features, how his eyes seemed to darken when they met hers, how the faint scent of his cologne teased her senses. "Long day?" she asked, partly to break the silence, partly because she wanted an excuse to hear his voice again. "Long week," he admitted. "But sometimes, the quiet of the building at this hour has its own appeal." She tilted her head, intrigued. "Appeal?" He shrugged, leaning slightly against the wall opposite her. "It's rare to find a moment without distractions. No phones ringing, no meetings, no endless chatter. Just this." He gestured vaguely at the elevator, then back to her, and Cassandra felt a flutter in her stomach she couldn't quite name. The elevator moved smoothly between floors, the soft glow of the overhead light casting subtle shadows on his face. She noticed the way he studied her, eyes lingering just a fraction longer than necessary, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I'm Cassandra," she said, offering her hand, though she barely knew why. He took it, his grip firm but not overpowering. "Ethan," he replied. Their fingers brushed, a subtle spark that made her shiver. A quiet laugh escaped her, surprising in its warmth. "Ethan," she repeated, tasting the name. There was a cadence to it, a charm she couldn't ignore. "Cassandra," he said, his tone softening, intimate even. The elevator hummed around them, the confined space suddenly magnifying every glance, every movement. Her heart beat faster, anticipation pricing her skin. A sudden jolt made her stumble slightly, and he caught her wrist in a flash. Their eyes met, the closeness startling yet undeniably magnetic. She felt the warmth of his hand linger longer than necessary, and the brush of his thumb sent a shiver up her arm. "Sorry," he murmured, a faint smile playing on his lips. "The elevators can be a little unpredictable." "It's okay," she whispered, noticing how close they were, how the world outside had disappeared into the small space around them. I don't mind." He leaned back slightly, giving just enough distance to be comfortable but close enough to hold her attention. There was a teasing glint in his eyes, as though he could see the curiosity, the attraction, the fluttering excitement she barely controlled. The elevator continued its ascent, each floor passing slowly, teasingly. Cassandra felt a strange thrill in the quiet, a growing anticipation she couldn't explain. The night was far from over, and yet something told her this encounter, brief as it might seem, was about to change everything. And in that moment, trapped between floors and strangers, the first spark of something dangerous and irresistible had ignited. The soft hum of the elevator was suddenly interrupted by a jarring lurch, a metallic groan that echoed through the small space. Cassandra instinctively grabbed the handrail, heart leaping. Ethan's eyes widened for a fraction of a second, then narrowed with curiosity. That's new," he muttered, half amusement, half concern. The lights flickered briefly, then settled into their steady glow. Cassandra swallowed, trying to steady the sudden flutter in her chest. "Are we stuck?" she asked, a hint of nervous laughter in her voice. He leaned slightly closer, though not enough to be invasive, but just enough for her to feel the faint brush of his presence. "Seems like it. Elevators have a way of picking the worst possible moments, don't they?" The confined space felt suddenly smaller, the air warmer. Cassandra noticed how the tension in his posture mirrored her own. She tried to shift her weight, subtly, yet she couldn't stop herself from watching him. The way his shirt clung slightly to his broad shoulders, the curve of his jawline catching the light, it was impossible to look away. Ethan leaned back against the wall, his arms crossed loosely. "Well, this could be worse," he said lightly, though his eyes betrayed a different story, scanning her face as if memorizing it. "We could be stuck for hours." She laughed softly, the sound echoing oddly in the confined space. "Hours," she echoed. "I don't think I could handle that." He tilted his head, studying her with a sly smile. "Really? I think you could handle more than you realize." Cassandra felt her pulse quicken at the teasing edge in his tone. She wanted to look away, to regain some composure, but her body refused. There was something magnetic about him, something daring and confident that drew her in. A silence fell between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was charged, a quiet electricity that made each small movement feel deliberate, intentional. Her fingers grazed the strap of her bag, and she felt the heat of his gaze follow, subtle yet unmistakable. "I guess we'll just have to wait it out," she said finally, trying to steady her voice. "Seems that way," he replied, his lips curling in a faint smile. "You know, being trapped in an elevator can bring out the most interesting conversations." Cassandra's curiosity piqued. "Interesting how?" she asked, her voice soft, inviting. He leaned closer, just enough for her to catch the faint scent of his cologne, warm and woody, lingering in the air. "People let their guards down," he said, low enough that she had to lean slightly to hear him. "They talk about things they'd never say under normal circumstances. Secrets, desires, things that make them real." Her breath caught. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks, the small tremor in her stomach that wasn't entirely from fear. "Secrets," she repeated, almost as if testing the word. "Yes," he said, eyes darkening slightly, a flicker of intensity passing through his gaze. "Things you've never told anyone." She swallowed, the air suddenly thick with tension. "And you, are you going to share yours?" He smiled faintly, a mix of amusement and something more dangerous. "Maybe, if you share yours first." Cassandra felt a shiver run through her at the challenge, at the intimacy of the moment. Her pulse raced not with fear, but with anticipation, with the thrill of being so close to someone she barely knew, yet already felt inexplicably drawn to. For a moment, the outside world ceased to exist. No emails, no deadlines, no flickering fluorescent lights, just the small space, the quiet hum of the elevator, and the slow, deliberate electricity between them. Ethan stepped slightly closer, though careful to give her space, his gaze holding hers. "So, what's your secret, Cassandra?" Her lips parted, the words almost spilling out before she caught herself. There was something dangerous, intoxicating, about the way he asked, like he could see straight into her thoughts. She hesitated, then allowed a small, knowing smile to form. "Maybe I'll tell you," she whispered, "if you're lucky." The elevator shuddered again, a subtle warning of its fragile mechanics. But neither of them moved away. Instead, the near-trapped silence only drew them closer, every heartbeat a drumbeat of anticipation, every glance a spark that could ignite into something uncontrollable. And in that suspended moment, between floors and unspoken desires, Cassandra realized this night would not end quietly or normally. The elevator hung between floors, its soft mechanical hum the only sound in the confined space. Cassandra could feel her heartbeat in her ears, each beat louder than the last, a rhythm that seemed to echo Ethan's steady presence beside her. The initial shock of being trapped had faded, replaced by something far more dangerous: anticipation. Ethan leaned casually against the wall, his arms crossed loosely, but the slight tilt of his body toward her betrayed the magnetic pull he felt as well. "You know," he said, his voice low, almost conspiratorial, "most people would be panicking right now. But you seem curious." Cassandra let out a small laugh, though it was tinged with a nervous tremor. "Curious," she repeated, the word lingering in the air like a challenge. "Or maybe I just enjoy seeing how people react when things go wrong." His eyes darkened slightly, the kind of look that made her stomach flutter uncontrollably. "Oh, I see. So you like testing boundaries." She tilted her head, pretending to consider it. "Maybe. Or maybe I just like discovering unexpected connections." Her voice softened, lower now, intimate. She could feel the closeness, the subtle warmth of his body near hers, and the brush of the air around them carried a subtle thrill. Ethan's smile was slow, deliberate, and it sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Connections, huh? Dangerous ones, I hope." Her breath caught. "Depends on what kind of danger you mean." The elevator seemed to shrink around them, every inch of space between them suddenly significant. Cassandra noticed the way he moved subtly closer, careful, almost teasing, as if testing the invisible line between them. Her pulse raced not with fear, but with something far more thrilling, something that made her aware of every nerve ending in her body. "I have a confession," Ethan said suddenly, his voice softer, more intimate. He didn't move closer, yet somehow the words felt like they were meant only for her. "Being near you, it's distracting." Cassandra's chest tightened. She could feel the heat rising to her cheeks, the flutter in her stomach impossible to ignore. "Distracting," she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper, yet full of curiosity and longing. "Yes," he admitted, his gaze locking with hers, unflinching. "I can't stop noticing you. Your hands, your smile, the way you carry yourself. It's captivating." Her lips parted, breath hitching. "Captivating, you say?" Her voice was soft, teasing now, daring him to continue, to push the invisible boundary that drew them together. Ethan's eyes darkened with something she couldn't quite name: desire, amusement, challenge all rolled into one. "Yes," he murmured. "And I can't decide if it's dangerous, or irresistible." Cassandra felt a small laugh escape her lips, though it was heavy with tension. "Irresistible, you say," she teased, leaning just slightly toward him, drawn by something she couldn't control. Every inch closer heightened the electricity crackling between them, every subtle movement a deliberate dance in the confined space. He didn't move away. Instead, he leaned just slightly, close enough for her to feel the faint heat radiating from his body, and the subtle brush of his sleeve against hers. The contact was fleeting, accidental, or perhaps deliberately so, and yet it made her heart race in ways that startled her. For a moment, they just stood there, suspended in the small space, caught in a silent, magnetic pull neither could deny. Her hand brushed against the strap of her bag, and he followed the movement with a glance, eyes darkening, voice low, "You're playing with fire, Cassandra. And you're enjoying it," she whispered back, the soft intonation sending a shiver down her spine. A long pause followed, the kind where words aren't necessary, where the air itself seems thick with anticipation. Every subtle glance, every almost touch, built a tension that made the confined space feel unbearably intimate. Cassandra realized, with a thrill she couldn't contain, that this elevator trapped between floors, suspended in silence, had become a world of its own. A world where boundaries blurred, and desire hung just beneath the surface, waiting for a spark to ignite it. Ethan's hand brushed against the wall beside her, his presence closer than ever, his body angled toward hers in a way that felt deliberate, magnetic. "I wonder," he said slowly, almost teasing, "how much longer we'll have before we have to leave this little world we've created." Cassandra's breath hitched. The words, the proximity, the undeniable pull between them, it was intoxicating. And in that suspended moment, trapped between floors, she knew with certainty, whatever this was, it had only just begun. The confined space of the elevator seemed to hum around them, charged with a tension neither Cassandra nor Ethan could ignore. Each flicker of light, each subtle shift of weight, felt amplified, almost exaggerated in the stillness between floors. Cassandra could feel the warmth radiating from him, and the quiet intimacy of the moment made her pulse quicken. "You know," Ethan began, his voice softer now, intimate in a way that drew her in, "it's strange. Being stuck like this, it makes people talk about things they normally wouldn't." Cassandra tilted her head, curiosity sparking. "Like what?" she asked, letting the word linger, almost a dare. "Secrets," he said, letting the word hang between them. "Little pieces of yourself you'd never admit to anyone else." He paused, watching her reaction closely. "Things that matter, but you've hidden." Her breath caught. "Secrets, huh?" she whispered. Her eyes flicked to his, searching, teasing, daring him to continue. "And you, what are you hiding, Ethan?" He smiled faintly, a slow curve of lips that sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. "Maybe I'll tell you, if you tell me one first." Cassandra hesitated, the challenge sparking something thrilling deep inside her. The tension between them was no longer just physical, it had grown into something sharper, more intimate. She wanted to test him, to see how far this game could go. Slowly, deliberately, she stepped a fraction closer, her shoulder brushing lightly against his. "My secret," she murmured, her voice low, teasing. "I like danger. In small doses, of course." She caught the flicker in his eyes, the hint of intrigue that crossed his expression. "And I like people who aren't afraid to take risks." Ethan's gaze darkened, a slow, deliberate heat radiating from him. "Dangerous," he murmured. "I like that. There's something exhilarating about someone who steps close to the edge without fear." Cassandra's pulse quickened, her skin tingling with the magnetic pull of his presence. She could feel the electricity between them, subtle yet undeniable, like a live wire under her fingertips. Every small gesture, every lingering glance, heightened the tension in ways she hadn't expected. "I suppose," she said softly, leaning slightly closer, "the thrill isn't just in the risk, but in knowing someone might match it." Ethan's eyes flickered down to her lips for the briefest moment before returning to meet her gaze. "I think I could match it," he said, his voice low, measured, intimate. "And maybe, even push it further." The words sent a shiver through her. She realized, with a thrill she couldn't contain, that this elevator suspended between floors had become a world of its own. A world where the usual rules didn't apply, where boundaries blurred, and every glance, every brush of skin, carried weight. "I wonder," she whispered, almost to herself, "how far we could go before the doors open again." Ethan leaned slightly closer, just enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from him, the faint brush of his arm near hers. "We'll find out," he said, voice low, deliberate. "But only if you let go, just a little." Her heart raced. The thought of surrendering, even partially, was intoxicating. Every nerve ending felt alive, every heartbeat a drum of anticipation. Cassandra had always thought of herself as cautious, careful, but something about him, about this moment, made her want to test limits she hadn't dared approach before. "You make it sound so tempting," she admitted, letting a small smile curve her lips, teasing him, testing him, daring him to follow. Ethan's smile mirrored hers, slow, deliberate, magnetic. "It is tempting," he said softly. "And I have a feeling, we're both too curious to resist it." For a long moment, they simply stood there, suspended between floors, the world outside forgotten. Words were no longer necessary, the quiet, charged space spoke volumes. The subtle tension, the teasing glances, the deliberate closeness, it was all a prelude, an unspoken promise of what was to come. Cassandra could feel it in every glance, every slight brush of their bodies, every whispered word. The desire, the anticipation, the unspoken pull between them, it was undeniable. She knew, with a certainty that made her pulse quicken, that the night had only just begun, and that whatever awaited them beyond the elevator doors would be far more intoxicating than she could have imagined. And in that suspended moment, trapped between floors and unspoken truths, they both understood, the real seduction had only just begun. The hum of the elevator seemed louder now, almost resonant with the tension between them. Cassandra's pulse raced, each breath quick and shallow, as she felt Ethan's presence near her. Every subtle movement he made seemed deliberate, magnetic, drawing her in without words. The small space felt impossibly intimate, every inch of proximity charged with a heat that neither could ignore. Ethan's eyes lingered on her, slow and deliberate, tracing the lines of her face with a focus that made her shiver. "You're dangerous, you know that," he murmured, his voice low, teasing, almost a growl. "Am I?" Cassandra whispered, letting the word hang between them, soft yet daring. She shifted slightly closer, letting her shoulder brush gently against his arm. The contact was fleeting, accidental, or maybe intentional, but it sent a thrill racing through her. "You are," he said, leaning just slightly toward her. She could feel the faint warmth radiating from his body, the subtle brush of air between them like a live wire. "But I'm tempted to see just how dangerous." Her breath caught at the suggestion, at the unspoken promise in his words. Cassandra's heartbeat thundered in her chest, each beat a drum of anticipation, each glance a spark of something thrilling and forbidden. "And you?" she asked, her voice soft, teasing, but not hiding the pulse of desire she felt. "Are you dangerous?" Ethan's lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile, his eyes dark and focused. "Depends on how you define it," he said, stepping just a fraction closer. The distance between them shrank imperceptibly, yet every movement carried weight, every shift a deliberate tease. "I could be dangerous in ways you haven't imagined." Cassandra felt a shiver run through her, subtle yet undeniable. The air between them seemed to thrum with energy, the confined space amplifying every glance, every almost touch, every unspoken word. Her hand brushed against the strap of her bag again, and Ethan's gaze followed it, dark and intent, sending a pulse of heat through her body. "Careful," he murmured, his voice low, teasing, "you're playing with fire." "And you," she countered, stepping just slightly closer, letting her fingers brush lightly against his sleeve. "Are you enjoying it?" His eyes flickered down to her hand, then back to her face, slow, deliberate, magnetic. "Very much so," he admitted, the words barely above a whisper but heavy with meaning. The subtle closeness, the teasing touches, the electricity in the air, it was intoxicating, impossible to ignore. For a long moment, they simply stood there, suspended between floors, the world outside forgotten. The silence was not empty, it was charged, heavy with anticipation, a quiet promise of what could come. Cassandra could feel her skin tingling where his hand had nearly touched hers, her pulse quickening with every subtle movement. "You have no idea," she whispered, voice low, teasing, daring him to take the next step. "How tempting you are." Ethan's gaze darkened, his lips curling into a slow, deliberate smile. "I think I might," he said softly, leaning just slightly closer, the warmth of his body brushing against hers. "And I have a feeling, we both know this isn't just temptation anymore." Cassandra felt the thrill surge through her, a rush of adrenaline and desire that left her breathless. Every glance, every subtle brush of skin, every lingering look between them made the confined space feel almost unbearable. The tension had become a living thing, vibrating in the small elevator, pulling them together in ways neither could resist. Ethan's hand brushed briefly against the wall behind her, close enough that she felt the heat radiate, close enough that her senses were alight with anticipation. "You're incredible," he murmured, his voice low, intimate, heavy with meaning. "And I can't stop noticing you." Cassandra's lips parted slightly, her pulse hammering in her ears. "I feel the same," she admitted softly, the words barely a whisper but carrying the weight of truth. The magnetic pull between them had grown undeniable, the quiet space of the elevator transformed into a world suspended between desire and restraint, anticipation and action. For a moment, they simply breathed, the charged silence stretching on, each heartbeat echoing in the small space. And in that suspended, intimate world, both knew that the moment for restraint was fading and the moment for surrender, for giving in to the pull between them, was drawing nearer. The elevator seemed smaller now, the air between Cassandra and Ethan thick with anticipation. Every movement, every glance, every subtle shift of weight was magnified, charged with a tension that had grown impossible to ignore. Cassandra could feel the warmth radiating from him, the faint brush of his sleeve against her arm, and each accidental contact sent a shiver racing through her. Ethan leaned just slightly closer, his voice a low murmur that brushed against her ear. "You know, I've been thinking about this moment since we first stepped inside." Cassandra's pulse quickened, her breath catching in her throat. "And what exactly have you been thinking?" she asked, her voice soft, intimate, daring him to speak the truth she already felt in every nerve ending. "That I can't resist it any longer," he admitted, his eyes dark and focused, holding hers in a way that made her stomach flutter uncontrollably. "This tension between us, it's too much to ignore." Her lips parted slightly, a quiet gasp escaping her. She had felt it too, the pull, the heat, the undeniable attraction that had been building with each passing moment. And now, with the elevator suspended between floors, it felt like the world outside had disappeared entirely, leaving only the two of them in this charged, intimate space. Ethan's hand moved subtly, brushing against hers, fingers grazing lightly, teasingly. Cassandra's breath hitched at the contact, the subtle spark between them igniting a fire she hadn't anticipated. She leaned in slightly, drawn by the pull she could no longer resist. "You have no idea," she whispered, her voice low and breathy, "how much I've wanted this." Ethan's lips curved into a slow, deliberate smile. "I think I might," he murmured, his gaze locked with hers. "And now? I want to see just how far we can take it." The moment seemed suspended, timeless, as if the elevator had become a world of its own. Every inch of space between them was charged, every subtle movement a prelude to something more. Cassandra felt her heart hammering in her chest, every nerve alive with anticipation, every glance a spark of temptation she could no longer resist. Ethan's hand moved just slightly, brushing the small of her back, a touch light yet deliberate. Cassandra's knees weakened slightly at the contact, and she leaned closer, drawn to him by an invisible force. The heat between them was palpable, the confined space amplifying every sensation, every whispered word, every lingering look. "I can't stop noticing you," Ethan murmured, his voice low, intimate, carrying a weight that made her pulse race. "And I don't want to." Cassandra's breath hitched, her lips curving into a small, knowing smile. "Then don't," she whispered, letting herself be pulled into the moment, letting the magnetic tension guide her movements. She closed the slight distance between them, feeling the warmth of his body, the subtle brush of his hand, the undeniable pull that had been building since the moment they met. The elevator shuddered slightly, a subtle reminder of its suspended state, but neither moved away. Instead, they leaned into the closeness, the tension breaking into a delicate, thrilling intimacy. Every glance, every touch, every whispered word deepened the connection, making the confined space feel impossibly electric. Ethan's fingers brushed along her arm, tracing light, deliberate patterns that sent shivers down her spine. Cassandra responded instinctively, leaning just slightly, pressing closer, matching his subtle movements, letting the heat and anticipation guide her. "You're intoxicating," he murmured, his lips near her ear, voice low and deliberate. "And I can't resist it?" Cassandra's chest heaved, her pulse racing, every nerve ending alight with desire. "Neither can I," she whispered back, her words a breath, a tease, a promise. The small space of the elevator had transformed into a world where restraint was fleeting, and surrender to the pull between them was inevitable. For a long, suspended moment, they simply held the closeness, letting the tension between them rise, letting every glance, every brush of skin, every whispered word carry the promise of what was to come. And in that suspended world, both knew that the moment for giving in had arrived and nothing beyond these walls could stop the fire that now consumed them. The elevator shuddered softly, then lurched as if awakening from a suspended dream. Cassandra felt a pang of disappointment. It had been a world apart, a suspended reality where every glance, every brush of skin, every whispered word had been amplified into something intoxicating, something almost unbearable. Ethan's hand lingered near hers, fingers brushing lightly, a silent acknowledgement of the magnetic pull that had dominated the past hours. Their eyes met, and in that gaze was a mixture of desire, curiosity, and an unspoken question, what now? The soft hum of the elevator shifted, signaling movement. Slowly, deliberately, the car descended, carrying them toward the real world, the outside world that felt impossibly mundane compared to the intimate universe they had created between floors. Cassandra's pulse raced, her stomach fluttering with a cocktail of excitement and nervous anticipation. So, Ethan murmured, his voice low, intimate, teasing, the question is, what do we do now? Cassandra's lips curved into a small, mischievous smile. Now, she echoed, her voice breathy. Now, we see where this goes. He chuckled softly, the sound vibrating through the small space. I like your answer, he said, leaning just slightly closer. Their proximity was intoxicating, the air between them charged, as if the elevator itself had become an accomplice to the tension, the desire, the spark that refused to be ignored. Cassandra's hand brushed lightly against his, not intentionally, but deliberately enough to send a jolt of electricity through them both. I never expected this, she admitted softly, to feel, this way, in an elevator of all places. Ethan's smile deepened, a slow, deliberate curl of lips that made her pulse skip. Neither did I, he admitted. But maybe, some moments are meant to be unexpected. The elevator doors began to open, the soft chime breaking the suspended spell they had been under. Cassandra's heart tightened. Reality was creeping back in, and with it, the question of whether the magic of this moment could survive the mundane world outside. Ethan's hand brushed hers again, lingering slightly longer this time. I don't want this to end, he murmured, voice low, intimate, almost a plea. Cassandra's eyes softened, a smile curving her lips. It doesn't have to, she whispered. We can, continue. Her words carried promise, invitation, and the thrill of the unknown. The door slid fully open, revealing the empty, brightly lit lobby. The world outside seemed impossibly ordinary, but the heat of their shared moment lingered like a flame refusing to die. Cassandra stepped forward, but Ethan followed immediately, closing the small gap between them. Shall we? He asked softly, a teasing glint in his eyes. Cassandra nodded, letting a small laugh escape her lips. Yes, she whispered, the word carrying weight, promise, and anticipation. They walked toward the exit together, the outside world stretching ahead, yet somehow feeling smaller, more mundane compared to the intensity of the suspended universe they had inhabited just moments before. Every step was deliberate, every glance a continuation of the magnetic pull that had begun in the quiet, humming elevator. Ethan reached for her hand finally, this time deliberately, intertwining their fingers. Cassandra felt the heat surge through her again, a thrill of connection, intimacy, and anticipation that refused to fade. This, he murmured softly, feels right. It does, she agreed, squeezing his hand lightly, feeling the unspoken bond that had formed between them. The tension, the attraction, the danger, they had survived it, and now it had transformed into something tangible, something real, something that promised continuation beyond the walls of that elevator. They paused at the exit, taking a moment to breathe, to look at one another. Cassandra could see the same mix of desire, curiosity, and anticipation mirrored in Ethan's eyes. The night was still young, and the possibilities stretched before them like an open horizon. Where to? She asked softly, a teasing edge to her voice, inviting the next chapter. Ethan's smile was slow, deliberate, magnetic. Wherever we want, he replied. Because I have a feeling, this is only the beginning. And with that, they stepped out into the night together, the world outside suddenly vibrant, alive, and full of promise. The elevator, suspended between floors, had been a world of temptation and desire, but now, the real adventure awaited, one they would navigate side by side, hearts racing, pulses quickened, and a connection neither could deny. For Cassandra and Ethan, the night was no longer about chance, it was about choice, curiosity, and surrendering to the magnetic pull that had begun in the quiet hum of an elevator and promised to continue far beyond it.